The Rangers are selling, Wild Bill Karlsson might be available, and Alex Tuck is on the market. The Jets have all sorts of trade options. Let's talk through them on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Let's dive right into it. The NHL trade market just continues to get more and more interesting. Lots of teams making moves. Yesterday, we talked about Chris Kreider actually getting moved to Anaheim. That deal actually hasn't technically gone through yet just because Kreider actually has to waive his no trade to Anaheim, which does seem like it's happening. But it's opened up a big conversation about maybe some of the other names in New York that could be on the table. There's quite a few pieces that I think teams are going to be intrigued by. The Rangers are kind of in this weird spot of trying to shake things up, and it seems like almost nothing is really off the tables. I mean, maybe Adam Fox is not going to move. You think about that, but aside from that, there's maybe nothing stapled or at least nailed down to the boards, right? So they're in a good spot to maybe make some moves. Maybe they call up their old friends in the Jets. But Winnipeg also has other destinations to look at. Maybe Wild Bill Karlsson out of Vegas is exactly what they need to fill that 2C vacancy. And then we also have the Buffalo Sabres. They're looking to make some deals. And maybe, an Alex Tuck or Ryan McLeod. There's some real options here with this team and maybe some good fits for a team like Winnipeg that's looking for, a bigger piece of the pie. But before we dive into that, let's start off with the Rangers. So New York is kind of an interesting spot. They've got a lot of money tied up for the foreseeable future. A lot of it's aging, and I think the Rangers core at this point is probably kind of done, right? Unless Drury can architect some sort of miraculous turnaround, this group has basically just kind of come apart at the seams. This past season sort of felt like the team kind of gave up the ghost, was kind of just done. And with that in mind, it feels like there's really not much there that's nailed down. You couldn't really pick a name that I would say is untouchable. There are a few guys that I think they would be extremely loath to give up. Chief among them, players like Fox and Lafreniere. But even Lafreniere, I wonder about. And if Lafreniere would be available, would that be a player the Jets go after? He had a career year a couple seasons ago, signed this big, massive extension that's just really starting to kick in. And now you're kind of looking at his contract and wondering, is he about to be jettisoned, right? You think about his age, the term on his deal, the cap hit, and you think about this team's projection in future, there's really not a lot of reason to hang on to an asset right now unless you're just trying to keep on, some level of consistency. But, I mean, obviously the Panarin situation has kind of blown things up a little bit. Kreider's gone. Trouba's gone. You brought in JT Miller. That didn't really work. And so this team really has to sort of go through the weeds and start moving some stuff. And I look at a guy Lafreniere as a really nice to have, but not somebody that I think is a must keep. And so if you're trying to move a big player like that, which I would say is probably one of their last resorts, but could happen, maybe that's a guy that the Jets go for. I kind of feel like Winnipeg's going to look more in the margins, though. Could you look at a Keandre Miller for your third pairing? Miller is likely to get traded before July 1st. That seems to be reportedly one of the certainties right now. And so for Winnipeg, could you be into a player like that? And I would have time for Miller. I do feel like he has some risk with this game. Defensively, he had some real lapses this past season, and offensively, the puck moving was inconsistent. We saw his first couple of seasons look really bright, and then something just happened with the Rangers, and things haven't really been the same since. So you'd have to bank on him kind of recovering and finding form, but maybe it's really as simple as just getting him out of there. The Rangers are kind of a toxic cesspool right now, and I wouldn't want to be in that org if I was a player. I know that they have a lot of history and a lot of respect and money, but it just seems like a team that's not really going anywhere good. Will Cooley also kind of on that same vein. We talked about him yesterday as a player to not offer sheet, but as a guy that you might have an interest in trading for. Cooley could be an interesting middle six upgrade for the Jets. I feel like his profile kind of fits as a relatively meat and potatoes, but still effective net front, big forechecky kind of guy with a good shot. His game has really grown since his juniors days. I was actually a little bit surprised that he's come this far and really been as effective as he is. I guess the most likely scenario is both, he and Miller end up somewhere that's not Winnipeg, but Cooley could be an intriguing guy for the Jets. One other player that I do have some level of interest in, but I wouldn't say is really high on my list, Arthur Kaliev. Kaliev has kind of bounced around a bit. He's got a big shot, and his game is not exactly, crazy sophisticated, but at what he does, I feel like he's reasonably, successful. Again, you're looking for him to really be that big one-time option, a really solid release, very smart shooter. In terms of transition and stuff, you're not getting a lot out of that aspect of his game. But again, if you're trying to boost your bottom six scoring and you're looking for somebody who maybe has some versatility, some room for growth, that is a guy that could make some sense. But I'm curious, right? The Jets have traded with the Rangers before. They're on pretty good terms with this team. Winnipeg's got a lot of guys that kind of fit stuff that the Rangers have liked. Maybe they'd be interested in a Barlow package. Maybe they'd even want to make a bigger deal around somebody like Lambert. I actually think there are some intriguing future fits for the Rangers because New York at this point, I don't know what their plan is. I don't know if they're trying to get better really quickly and maybe retool on the fly, but I'm looking at this roster, man. There's just not that much to really build around in the immediate future. So in my mind, if you're starting to jettison big players like this, you're going to lose Panarin and Kreider pretty soon here. Trocheck's aging out, and you're left with Miller, JT Miller, Zibanejad, and Lafreniere. What do you really have left to build around? And so maybe the Jets can't give them an elite number one prospect, but Winnipeg has a lot of volume, and that could go a long way for a team like New York that needs to really restock its pool, needs to make the Wolf Pack, a really decent call-up base again, with some young prospects who are maybe on the cusp of making it, some guys to really round out this depth because, man, I'm telling you, the Rangers roster situation, it's pretty grim. And based on how things have sort of fallen apart, I just don't know how they climb out of this hole. This team, came out of the gates looking pretty decent. It fell apart, and the stuff that's really hurt the squad feels very deep. So if the Jets want to make a deal here, be careful, buyer beware on some stuff. But I think there are a couple of players who could immediately help some of the depth challenges that the Jets have and might not cost them an arm and a leg. We're already on good terms with the Rangers. We're kind of like Rangers West in some ways. We like to swap players. We've done it many times in the past. Maybe the Jets and Rangers are going to consummate that relationship at least one more time. But curious to know if any of these guys really ring a bell for you. Do you have interest in somebody else that I haven't talked about? Is a Trocheck up your alley? For me personally, I didn't really talk about Trocheck because I'm not personally a big fan of what I think his game would be here in Winnipeg, but he's technically an option if he would waive. Not that I think he would, but, you never know. Crazier things have happened. There is a guy, though, out there that I think could waive for the Jets, and I want to talk about him, right? This is a player out in Vegas who has been coming up in a lot of trade rumors and conversations. Either he or one of his teammates could be on the move. We'll chat about which one the Jets should go for in one brief moment. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. As a Marylander, I love cracking open crabs. It's a thing. So the shelled variety of Wonderful Pistachios is great. But if you're on the go, you're dropping your kids off at school, you need something before your workout, or you just want something to beat the 3 p.m. slump at work, well, guess what? They've got a no-shelled variety. It comes in some great flavors and seasonings, and Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are chatting a little bit about some interesting trade rumors and stuff. And out of Vegas, they're another team that's probably looking to shake things up just a bit. They have a lot of money on the books. They don't have a lot of time with this core. And with, some big free agents coming up in the next couple of seasons, Mark Stone, Jack Eichel, their timeline has actually shrunk quite a bit. Now, we've heard some rumors that Bill Karlsson, and this is probably more than just a rumor, it feels pretty substantiated that he's likely to try and be moved this summer. If you're the Jets, Karlsson is very much the 2C that you would probably be intrigued by. Now, he does have to have his trade clause obviously waived. He's got a modified NTC, and I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets are on it, but he'd be moving to a President's Trophy team. It'd only be for, a max of around 2 seasons. At that point, he could probably move elsewhere if he really felt like it. But Karlsson for the next year or two would be a very good stopgap solution if you want somebody who's still got some defensive acumen, who's got a pretty good shot, and who actually still skates pretty well. He does get some stick from Vegas fans, and I know that he's maybe not the Karlsson that they had when they first had their expansion draft, but he's still kind of good. I think he's a pretty effective player. And at, just under $6 million, his, cap hit's relatively affordable. And for the Jets, I think he would give you not necessarily a Stastny level player, but maybe somebody kind of in that range. And it's not like Vegas doesn't deal with the Jets. The Knights have certainly made no secret that they're comfortable with making a deal with Winnipeg if it suits both, their own interests and doesn't really, improve the Jets to some terrifying degree. And I think Karlsson is kind of one of those guys where as long as they can make the fit work and they can get something for him, they'll be willing to do it. Getting that cap space back and the flexibility to make some roster changes is probably more important than anything. So Karlsson could be a guy that you get at a not crazy price. I'm not sure what a return for him would be. I think in a normal market, he would have been a crazy, crazy desired asset, probably one of the more sought after centers, but there's going to be a lot of guys who are, RFAs, maybe some offer sheet targets, maybe some big trade targets. And so Karlsson kind of falls a little further down the list than usual. He might be the 8th or 9th or even 10th guy that teams go after amidst all of the top free agents and big trade targets that we're looking at this summer. There's so much ahead of him that I just feel like this is a target of opportunity for the Jets. Now, the other guy who might get moved is Barbashev. And if Barbashev is the center that they move, he's decent. I think the bigger thing with Barbie is that he's a little more limited and defensively not particularly robust. My feeling is that he would be an effective goal scorer and certainly, he brings a nice finishing element that the Jets definitely have trouble with, but I don't think his overall game is as well-rounded. He does have another year on his deal, and he's also a little bit cheaper. I just look at Barbashev as one of those guys where, in terms of what the Jets need and what they ask of their centers, I don't feel he's as good of a fit. It'd kind of be like, a Kyle Connor becoming your center. Again, there's something to his game that could be okay, but I just really wouldn't be, I would say, hot to trot for him like I would be for Karlsson. I think Karlsson both fits Winnipeg's timeline a little bit better and offers more versatility and overall, two-way impact. Now, if you're looking elsewhere in Vegas, would this be some kind of a package deal? Would you try and prize somebody else out there? Probably not. I don't think Vegas is all that intrigued by, more than that moving. They do have some RFAs that could be of interest to the Jets. Chief among them probably being Nick Hag. Maybe Hag is a guy that you go for if you think your third pairing needs a really big upgrade. But aside from that, I tend to look at this as a very one target sort of team. And so if this trade does happen, maybe you can make it happen for like a modest second round pick and maybe something else. The only trick is, of course, the Jets have traded away some of their recent picks, both in this draft and next, and so the Jets don't have as many assets that are not in that middle tier or that are in that middle tier. So hopefully they don't have to pay like a crazy premium, but Vegas will still get something decent for Karlsson. There could still be a team out there that lines up for him. And in terms of what Vegas would want from our prospect pool, I mean, maybe you look at like a he or something. I would personally not like that for a lot of reasons. I don't really look at it so much as just a personal level. I really like Kevin He. I like Kieran Walton. I like these prospects. I've probably gotten a little too attached to some of them, but ultimately, the Jets need to cash in on on the great pool that they've built and make something happen with their guys. They've got lots of decent pieces that could fit other teams that might be better served moving on and helping the Jets upgrade some key positions here. And that's kind of where I'm at with this team. Winnipeg is in a good spot, relatively speaking, to spend. They have pretty much all of their assets after not really doing much at the trade deadline. And so this summer, with so many squads selling quality players, maybe you can even squeeze the Knights a little bit. You don't have to go after him immediately. You might be able to sit and wait. We've seen the Jets do this in previous trade situations where they sort of let the dust settle. They let some other teams maybe overpay early, and suddenly somebody sort of falls through the cracks, and a team gets desperate to try and create space and move them, and that is when Winnipeg does their best work. So Karlsson could be one of those guys because, again, he's a little bit further down the pecking order. I think the Jets have a real opportunity to try and maybe get a decent package sent back the other way that doesn't really break the bank, and everyone kind of walks away happy. Now, as far as what Karlsson could do for the Jets, I think his primary impact would just be stabilizing Winnipeg's top nine. Our center depth is looking a little all over the place. It does sound like Taves is on his way. Cam Robinson posted earlier and said that it basically every team seems to know that Taves is signing in Winnipeg. There's no real decision to be made. We saw a report earlier today that he's narrowing down his choices. It's Winnipeg. Like, that's just it. There's no other team. It's Winnipeg. So that'll be announced probably in the near future. He can't technically sign until July 1st, but he will have confirmed his decision before then. So I don't know when that's going to happen. Probably in the next couple weeks here, I would think. It can't be that much longer. And with that, you have what? Maybe Scheifele. You could have Karlsson at 2C, Lowry, if he's healthy enough, for 3C, and Taves at 4C. That's decent. The only question I have here is like the foot speed issue, and I think that that's a bigger, conversation with this team, especially with their center depth. The Jets just don't really seem to add a ton of transition ability down the middle. So, could that be a problem here? Maybe. Karlsson's probably going to be among the faster of the centers that they have, so that'd be great. But beyond that, I do, again, have some reservations about how this team is constructed, but given the options, given what Winnipeg needs to do, you've got to make some lemonade out of something, and hopefully a Karlsson fit here would do the Jets a world of good. It'd rebalance their top nine. It'd give them some real chances to overhaul how the line matchups work and maybe give Arniel something more to work with. My hope is that he doesn't go back to the Nemesnikov 2C well, because that just doesn't work, but we'll have to see if he actually trusts a guy like Karlsson to really be that sort of player. And again, we won't know until probably closer to the draft, but if you're trying to make a play and you think that you can get Karlsson out of there at a reasonable price, there really is no reason not to. The Jets need to make a move. He's your 2C upgrade, and it solves a lot of problems. Now, if Winnipeg wants to go a little bit bigger scale and maybe make a bigger play for more than one player, Buffalo might be the place I would look to instead. Not only do they have a potential 2C option, but they also have a winger who might be able to soften the loss of Nick Ehlers. We'll chat about the Buffalo Sabres and their Jets fit coming right up. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a bit about some of the fits and trade options out there that are on the table, maybe some stuff that Winnipeg could take advantage of. A couple of players have sort of stuck out to me, and I look at a team like the Buffalo Sabres, and we've talked about the Sabres a lot recently because JJ Peterka has really been at the top of pretty much everyone's most wanted list. We've also heard about Owen Power maybe being available. It seems like a lot of Sabres players are kind of pissed about the direction of the team, and Buffalo itself can't be happy, right? They've got to figure something out, and they need more immediate assets right now. If I'm looking at Buffalo and I'm thinking about how to try and improve the team, I don't know what the immediate answer is, but I guess they just start making some deals and see what happens. They have been a team that was at one point rumored to be interested in Ehlers, and I wonder if something like that comes up again. If you were to try and do a sign and trade, and you could get Alex Tuch and maybe Ryan McLeod out of there at a reasonable price, would a sign and trade with Ehlers be enticing to the Sabres? I don't know how Nick himself would feel because he said he wants a reasonable chance to win. And Buffalo, for me, doesn't quite feel like that destination right now. But maybe if he joins this team and he helps them turn things around, you see a different Sabres team next season. In terms of Tuch and McLeod, I think it would solve a couple of interesting challenges for the Jets. Tuch would immediately be a very good top six wing. He's a big power forward. He's, somebody who's had experience playing in the Central Division before and out west, so he's built for that kind of gameplay. And his cap hit for the next season's very low, right? 4.75 mil, really not that expensive, really reasonable. The only challenge is he's then a free agent after that season, so I don't know if the Jets would plan to have him for the longer term. I don't know if he'd want to stick around. If he does, you could talk about an extension. I wouldn't go too deep with a big long-term deal, but that may be a conversation for a different time, right? First, you just have to even bring him in. And assuming that you also try and maybe solve your center question, your 2C option, maybe you go for a McLeod. McLeod was brought in from Edmonton to be their middle six demon, and he was pretty good for them. Defensively, he's got real good two-way responsibility. He, scored some decent goals here and there, chipped in some modest offense, but I don't think that he did anything that was really unmissable. Now, for the Jets, a Ryan McLeod could be a really intriguing option. You're looking for a really value-priced middle six center who might be, your backup to Lowry, or maybe even your more offensively inclined Lowry. And you're talking about McLeod, who put up pretty darn sparkling numbers for the Sabres, 53 points in 80-odd games. That could be, your big solution. Now, McLeod probably is going to be a little more expensive if you start to target that route, but it's also the kind of thing where maybe you look at this is your big play, right? Maybe you look at a first and Lambert or something as part of this package. Maybe you start to spend a bit more. Obviously, McLeod's an RFA as well, so he would have to feel comfortable extending in Winnipeg for me to want to go this route. And, it's also worth pointing out that he posted a career high 20% shooting percentage this past season. So do I think he's going to do 50 odd points in Winnipeg? I don't know. I think that that's actually a bigger question for me than I would be comfortable answering immediately. But if you prorate his minutes, he's not exactly taken a crazy jump compared to the last Oilers season he had, putting up 30 points in around 14 minutes. In almost 17 minutes, he's had 53. So that does kind of seem to track. But again, how much do I want to lean into his past season being who he is going forward? I guess that's, the risk you take. But if you're looking for a guy who I think could provide a fair bit of middle six value and who I think would be a very good fit for what the Jets need, on top of bringing in maybe a big winger like Tuch, I think that there's intrigue there. The Sabres would probably look to try and also fish out maybe a prospect or something. Again, maybe you look at an Ehlers deal being kind of the centerpiece of this, or if they're looking at maybe more near-term futures that are capable of at least playing NHL minutes now, maybe they focus on a Lambert or a Chibrikov. There's legitimate options here, and quite a few different ways you could do this. Uh, do I think the Jets go this route? I don't know, and I think for the Sabres, they also have harder decisions to make. Do they think that this core is capable of getting it done? Do they want to make Paterka their big move and not really touch anything else? They just brought McLeod in. Do they really want to give up on him already? It's an interesting conversation, and I think Buffalo has to sort of evaluate what they think went wrong for them this past season. On paper, they're a pretty decent team, and in practice, it just went the complete opposite direction. When they couldn't get saves, they were scoring lots of goals. When the offense struggled, they weren't getting saves, and so it just seems like whatever it is, something's just in the waters in Buffalo, and they haven't been able to claw their way out. But as a trade partner, if you're looking for a shakeup and you think that, the Jets could be the best trading partner for a good mixture of futures and guys who are very imminent, I could see that happening. I don't think Winnipeg's going to be a player on bigger players like Power and Dahlin or anything of that nature. I think any of those sorts of trade offers are going to be from other squads. But I think Winnipeg has a real chance to maybe pluck, again, some of these middle tier players who are going to be bigger commodities on the market, but not the biggest names coming up in trade conversation. So this is a cool opportunity for the Jets. I've said it the past several episodes. I feel like the summer of Chevy really does have a chance to swing big and come away with a really overhauled top nine. Teams like the Sabres, Vegas, the Rangers, they're all trying to make some moves and get guys out. The Jets need to bring players in, quality players who can help them expand their core. This is just a match made in heaven. And it's not just these teams. There's quite a few others out there that are making moves and needing to shed some salary. So this is where Chevy can do some of his best work. He's taken advantage of other teams before. They've made bad choices. He's capitalized on them. Maybe he has one more ace up the sleeve that we have yet to see. But curious to know who in Buffalo would be of your interest. Are you looking at a guy like McLeod? Do you think he might be maybe Winnipeg's 2C answer? Who else would be interested, as a player to target? I've probably, gotten some thoughts about Jack Quinn maybe being an interesting salvage project. Maybe you try for a Bowen Byram. For a lot of reasons, I don't really want the Jets to go for either of those guys, but maybe you feel it differently. Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you here tomorrow, so have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.